What? Damn, bro. Keith Frank being your boy, bud.
I'm just
Does my nose look like Ric Flair's nose?
We are the National Wrestling Clipping Alliance.
Don't look at the camera. What? I'm getting flustered.
You're gonna get one of these, bud.
Well, man, Wes here with NWCA Podcast on YouTube, on our YouTube station. That's NWCA, National Wrestling Clippings Alliance. And we're back. Jesse's still on vacation / hiatus. He is getting his you-know-what together, and we're going to be moving on really soon, really shortly. We got tons and tons of stuff that we got to catch up on, so it's really exciting that everyone subscribes and pays attention to what's upcoming with our YouTube channel. We've also got our great sponsors, Hoppin' for Yalpon, Grand River Tea, sponsor right from the start for us, and Grumpy Bear Vinyls also doing a great job of t-shirts, vinyls, cups, hats, flags, you name it, they got it. Let them know. Grumpy Bear Vinyls and Grand River Tea. Don't forget it, Grand River Tea. At checkout, get a 15% discount on your purchase by putting in NWCA. You know, I've been thinking about having some people on recently, and it's come to my mind that, you know what, there's a guy I met quite a few years ago. We should have him on, and you know what, he's graciously decided to come on board. I can't wait to talk to him about some special things and his famous person that he kind of managed for a while, you know, not that big of a deal, but yeah, Super Uncle Dave Drason right here with us tonight. Awesome. Nice to see you again, Dave.
Same here, Wes. How are you?
I'm excellent. Manitoba's treating me well.
I'm sorry to hear about Jesse. You know, maybe you can, you know, have your sponsors, you know, take some money up and, you know, bail him out of jail. I think that's the word down here in the States. He's not on vacation or hiatus.
Jesse,
I don't know what he did wrong.
Jesse gets around a little bit. What can I say? Kids these days.
Yep.
And compared to us, he's a kid. Dave, I want you to just quickly give us a brief synopsis of that guy that you manage that's up there in the corner of your room. It must have been absolutely amazing.
It was the thrill of a lifetime. I couldn't believe it when it happened. You know, when I was a younger kid, I worked for him at Cobo Arena as his photographer and wrote the Body Press program. And then over the years, you know, I went on to my managing career away from, you know, big time wrestling. And years later, I'd say about 10 years later, he was on a show that I was on I was managing Malcolm Monroe and the Fabulous Kangaroos at the time, and saw him in the dressing room, and I hadn't seen him in 10 years. And we, you know, caught up, started talking and stuff. And, you know, he said he heard about my managing career and what I've been doing. And that was nice to hear. And he floored me by saying, hey, would you like to, you know, manage me from now on? And I'm like, you know, what was I going to say? No.
Exactly.
But managing the Sheik was so different than managing anybody else. I mean, I managed so many other guys over time, like, you know, Killer Brooks and Ben Justice and the Kangaroos and Al Snow and Mickey Doyle. And I mean, those were just great times. I had so much fun. But when you managed the Sheik, you know, I was, you know, in my mind, I had to do stuff, you know, like what Abdullah Farouk did, Ernie Roth. I had to do stuff like Eddie Creechman did. You know, I had to create heat, but I had to do it in my own way. And, you know, people say, you know, to this day that I was so different than, you know, those two guys because I took big bumps. You know, Bobby Heenan was the one who really taught me how to take bumps. And George Cannon, I have to give props to him because he was the one who told me on how to do stuff at ringside, when to do it, how to do it. And Ernie Roth or Abdullah Farouk was the one who taught me the way how to do promos. Okay. So those three guys were so intricate in my career, and they helped me. And those three things, you know, I thought I sort of excelled at.
So based on your size, I know you're a bit taller than I am. you were probably better in a certain degree than Creechman or Abdullah Farouk because you were a lot taller. Just giving you props because those guys were short.
Right. And you noticed my painting there,
Yeah.
and that was a gift given to me by superstar Billy Graham, and rest his soul, rest in peace, my friend.
Yeah.
I can never, say enough about that guy. When I first started out managing, I took his nickname. I started out as superstar Dave Drason, and in tribute to Billy Graham.
Okay.
And over time, when I was working for George Cannon and Milt Bruskin were doing the announcing. And at one point, Milt Bruskin said, "He's not no superstar. He's a supermouth." And the name stuck ever since then.
Awesome. Yes, we've got poster in the back there with you. We've always complained about not being on the posters. It's kind of funny that they would. Not every manager was on the poster, though, right?
No, posters and on, clippings, newspaper clippings, it was rare for us to be on them. No big deal, but, it all had to do with, drawing people to the arena and, putting on a show for them and, making them go home happy. And that's the one thing I always say, because I started out as a fan, and as a fan, I was really attracted to the managers and what they did and how they did things. And that's, when I performed or when I went out with, whoever I was with, I wanted to make sure I did something that those people, when they went home, they would talk about, the next day and many days after.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I've seen pictures of you in your gear and just kind of flaunting your youth, let's put it that way, because you did look like you flew all over the place quite a few times. And it's interesting that you got a different kind of manager heat than lots of other guys. And you like I said, you were a big guy, not necessarily weight wise, but tall.
Yeah, I was 5'14" and weighed 142 pounds. And when I first started managing, I was 2 days short of my 19th birthday.
Wow.
So
okay.
I started at 18. And at that time, this is back in 1974, I can't think of another wrestling manager at all up to that point in wrestling history who started that young. I mean, most managers were either former wrestlers or guys who worked in the office, over the years, for the promoter or for the promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And they were older guys, and, they'd always put those guys with, wrestlers who couldn't put themselves over, on a promo.
That's
so
right.
that was the manager's job back then. And, luckily, I had the right, people behind me. The Sheik was the one who really for like a year and a half, when I was still his photographer, whenever they do promos, either at Cobo after the show or up in Williamston, either the next day before we go to Toronto or, on a Monday or Tuesday, whenever, the mobile truck, they would be cutting promos, and whoever, running down the cards for the whole territory, not only Detroit, but all the, places in Ohio, Ontario, and Michigan. So I would always go, and the Sheik knew I wanted to be a manager, and he always helped me along. So at the end of, promo tapings, that they were doing, the Sheik would put me with somebody, one of the guys like Hank James, or I did Ben Justice or Killer Brooks, and okay, this is the situation. You go up there, 2 minutes promo, boom, and I'd be with Bob Finnegan or Terry Sullivan, and I would, cut a 2-minute promo. And then we'd go back into the truck, and the Sheik would analyze what I did. Did I say this right? Did I put this over right? You've got to, make yourself different. Don't be like everybody else.
Yeah.
Be yourself. Be the guy that you want to be. Because back then, the greatest thing about wrestling was all the wrestlers were characters. which we don't have anymore. You had the Germans, you had the Japanese, you had the Cowboys and Indians, you had, the Love Brothers, you had every kind of gimmick out there,
That's right.
which, name me a gimmick guy, today. I don't watch it, hardly at all. So I can't tell, who's out there gimmick wise.
Yeah, I don't watch it at all. And I was just briefly speaking with some people on the weekend, and we were talking about masked wrestlers, and there's basically no masked wrestlers because the guy would come out and everyone would be texting, oh, that's Johnny Smith or that's whatever, right? And there's no mystique whatsoever at all. But that's okay.
Yeah, I think the only masked ones are the luchadors, if they have any. Yeah. And they don't promote them too much. No. I mean, those are like probably the greatest high flyers in wrestling history. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you don't have a heel masked guy from Parts Unknown. That's right. You got to have a guy from Parts Unknown. He can't be from Jabronieville, Pennsylvania, or anything like that. Right. Those are the guys that can bring heat. And, during a match, the baby face trying to take the mask off.
All the nuances
that pops the crowd.
Yeah. The nuances that were popular back when we were fans. That just
exactly
non-existent now, which is, I get it. Life changes, things change. I don't watch anything other than the few clips Jesse sends me every once in a while. I hate saying it. I could care less.
Hopefully you don't get the same clips he sends me, those apartment house wrestling girls.
That's why he's in jail.
Yeah.
So, Dave, tell me about the UWA. Hardly anyone ever talks about it. I've got some clips here, and I'm going to post a bunch of clips and stuff after the show and the reels that we show. And tell me about how you got connected with them and a little bit of background about them.
Well, this happened right about October of 1974, just after Dick the Bruiser, his promotion failed, and the Sheik brought him back into the fold. So, Sheik Dick the Bruiser matches in Detroit, the people have been waiting for that for years. Well, other guys who were on those cards, Killer Brooks, Ben Justice, Carl Von Schatz, Dr. Beach, and so many others, they were getting shorted on payoffs. And at one point, I wasn't in on it at the time.
Okay.
And it came one Kobo show in October that a bunch of these guys didn't show up. And it's like, wow, they were scrambling, to, make a card of what they had. And I come to find out the next day, they had a show in Toledo, Ohio. It was like Killer Brooks, Tony Marino, and the other guys, like I mentioned. And Terry Sullivan also, went with them.
Okay, Terry bailed also.
Right, they ended up having TV also. So Terry was their TV commentator, and then also the Sheik's booker, Jack Kane, who was the uncle of Dorian Terry Funk.
Okay.
So the Sheik's booker left. So things were chaos back home here in Detroit at the time. And I, didn't know, I wasn't privy to a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And then it was like a month or two later, because I made my managing debut in October of 1974. I managed beautiful Ben Justice, but I was under a mask. The Sheik had me go out as the Scholar, and I had a white mask on, because if I went out, everybody around the territory knew who I was.
Yeah.
Hey, that's the photographer guy, so, that's, how I started. And then it was like a month or two after, I wasn't getting any more bookings, by the Sheik. He rather have me keep doing the photography for him and writing the body press. Yeah. I was making them money, and it really wasn't costing them much because they really didn't pay me that well. But, as a young kid, I was only, when I started with them, 15 years old. And, for a young kid like that, just to be in, have the in, that's good enough.
Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah. So then, once, the other guys, the UWA, contacted me and says, hey, we'd like you to be our lead manager. Would you be willing to come? And it's like, I jumped at the chance. So I just left, Sheik and Big Time Wrestling, and he wasn't too happy about it. I found out.
So were they based in Ohio?
Well, yeah, they were based basically in Toledo, Ohio, and there's a town along the water just north of Windsor where Karl von Schatz lived. There was dual because they had the Ohio towns and the towns in Ontario that we were doing.
Okay, because it's just no one ever talks about it, and I know we've just texted back and forth on Facebook about it. And I was doing some research on the weekend actually, and I've got just over 50 dates for their shows, and it's Toledo, Canton, some spot shows in Ohio, Bryan, Ohio, wherever that is, Napoleon, and of course all the shows in Ontario because they did a slew of shows, and they toured right across right from Windsor right to Ottawa. They have a clipping from the Ottawa show here. But this one from May 29th, 1979, actually has you on the card, which is nice for a change. So I'm going to show all those after the fact. But yeah, it's just really interesting because no one talks about it. And what I did notice one thing when I was doing research on the weekend that I don't know if you know this person, but I was wondering about Al Friend. Did you know him?
Oh, I knew Al real well. Me and him traveled, a lot together. I knew Al when he was here, for Big Time Wrestling. He was mainly a referee. Every so often he would wrestle on a spot show if needed. And then he ended up leaving and he went to Kansas City and he became, Percival Al Friend, managing Black Angus.
Yes.
And just on my many trips to St. Louis that I'd always go, there's a lot of times Don Wilson and I would, drive to Kansas City for, and meet with Gus Karras, and, he'll let us into the shows. And I knew a bunch of the guys like Dick Murdoch. I was like a 15-year-old kid. I show up in Kansas City and Dick Murdoch just saw me in Detroit. He goes, hey, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And it's, that happened a lot across the country when I would travel, as a kid.
Yes. And
I went there one time and Al Friend is there and he was like shocked to see me. And it's like, with a little bit of coaxing from him, he asked me if I'd do an interview with, him and Angus, shoot some pictures, and if I would do a thing, for, which I did an article which appeared in Wrestling Review magazine. Okay. And then, over time, managers don't make a lot of money like, wrestlers do. Al just couldn't, be on the road anymore. He ended up coming back home to Toledo, Ohio, where he lived, and he went to work at a paper company, and he had a wife and, kids, so he, basically got out of the wrestling business. But we brought him back in because in the UWA in our early years, we brought Al in as a referee.
Okay.
And, it was nice, but Al sort of regretted it in a way because I was their lead manager, and him being a former manager and an older, gentleman, he sort of resented that I was getting the attention and he's a referee now. And he was really stiff with me, when I would jump up on the ring and try to get attention. I mean, he was real stiff, It's not like he'd stand there and give you the thing, hey, get down there. I mean, he would, slap me or punch me or push me. It's like, God dang, Al, come on. And then, over the years, me and Al would always go down to Chicago area. There was a former judo champion who went to the Olympics and a former wrestler, Juan Hernandez.
Okay.
And he had a a food bank in memory of his goddaughter or his grandchild, or he put together a food bank because she, as a young kid, always would feed the homeless.
Oh,
If she had an ice cream cone or a sandwich or something, she'd give it up to the homeless. And that's why he started this charity. And they always once a year had a big golf tournament and memorabilia that they would sell, and they'd have a big banquet. And Juan would always invite me and Al. So me and Al, for years, drove together, down to, Chicago to lend, we didn't ask for any pay or anything like that. We just, donated our time. And during that, a good friend, Rich Tito in Chicago, happened to help me find out where Louis Martinez was, who I hadn't seen in, 20 years. And nobody knew what happened to him. And he was in a nursing home. And, on one of our visits, going, for the Alicia's house, function, me and Al went to see, Louis Martinez, and it was a heartbreaking thing to see him just laid up and, had no idea, that he was ever a wrestler, and, didn't know. When I brought up names like the Sheik and Bobo and Furpo and Haystacks, and, he just shook his head and had no idea. But the only name that really triggered on him is when I mentioned Jimmy Valiant.
wow.
He perked up, and Jimmy, and it's like, I let Jimmy Valiant know because good friends. I called Jimmy and says, "Hey, Louie's in this, nursing home in Chicago." And Jimmy is really from Elkhart, Indiana, that area.
Yeah.
And he had family there, and he always comes back once a year, and he made a trip to go see Louie.
Nice.
So it was a heartbreaking situation.
You wrote the excellent story in one of the Detroit magazines about meeting Louis, and that's a great story. And I remember I don't know why I brought up Al Friend, other than on my research on the weekend, he was in one of the pictures in wrestling in one of the spot shows. And it just jogged my memory. I couldn't remember what it was, and now it was the Alicia's house. That's right. I remember now. Is that
But
still
he,
going on?
going back to our UWA, he did some refereeing for us.
Okay, good. So what did you? How long did you travel with them? How long did you work with them?
About a year and a half, I'd say.
It was about promotionally lasted about that. So you were there for basically the whole run?
For the UWA, yes. But that morphed into Superstars of Wrestling. They on the Canadian side of things, they got involved with George Cannon, and George Cannon, he would be doing, he would do TV tapings at the University of Windsor, and then later on up in Toronto, and then in Montreal. And I, being still their lead manager, George brought me in, and I've known George for years and stuff. He brought me in and gave me an opportunity, and I managed a bunch of guys, for him, and that was great fun.
Did you keep your full-time job?
At the time, yes, because right when I was working with the UWA, like I said, it's hard to be driving a car and paying gas and insurance and hotels and place to live, and like I said, managers didn't make wrestler money, so it was very hard for me. And I had an opportunity. My uncle knew somebody at the time, Michigan Bell, and I came home from a little, we had a little time off, and he says, you don't really want to be doing that wrestling stuff. And, I wasn't really making that much money. He says, you really need a good regular job, and, somewhere where you can get, health insurance and, a pension and stuff like that. And he set me up with a guy at Michigan Bell. I went down and took a test, and this other guy was supposed to try to help me, get a job there, but they hired me on the spot.
Okay.
Because I could type fast.
Oh.
And they put me in this department called Teletype. And just because I was a writer and stuff for so many years, I'm in this, room, they did a bunch of tests on you, what you could bring to the company.
Yeah.
And it's like, this gal saw me typing so fast. She's, oh my God. They hired me on the spot for Teletype. And, I lasted at Michigan Bell and Ameritech and, AT&T 32 years and retired at age 50. So,
Wow.
they really took care of me. And that was, and like what you said before, did I have a job? Once I got my job and I started doing my managing stuff on the weekends, or if there was a, spot show close to home during the week, it was great. I was making, that was extra money for me then.
Yeah.
And, I'm really and it really gave me the opportunity, instead of the promoters saying, you're going to be here, 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 I'm saying, well, I'm going to be here, here, and maybe here.
Yeah.
And it really worked out for me well.
Dave, I know you've told the story before in different mediums, but I would love to get your take on some of your trips to Montreal.
Oh, Montreal, mercy sakes. The first time I went up there, I ended up staying with George Cannon and his family, or his, relatives up there.
Okay.
And it's like, they, I'm a, wine guy. But then I was a really young wine guy. I really didn't know much about wine. And, they, said, oh, we love wine. And they gave me a Bordeaux. And it's like, I turned up my nose at it because it was this dry beast. And I was, just starting out. And you drink, sweet wines when you first start out. And so his relatives were, giving me the business about that. But then there was another time that we went up there. Oh, God, in the wintertime, myself, Frenchie Martin, Don Ross, and Louis Martinez, it took us probably 14 to 17 hours to get up to Montreal on a regular 8 to 10 hour drive because of the snow. And then coming home, oh God, it was even worse. I let Louis Martinez drive at one point, and he drove at one point. It's like this semi truck came up and, blew the snow up. And it's like, next thing we know, we're in the medium between the two lanes of, the 401. Oh God. And, luckily a truck came by, saw what happened, and he, put a chain on us and pulled us out.
Okay.
But it was so bad that we had to have the windows down. Louis was driving, and I had my head out, the back, and Frenchie Martin, and we had our heads out the window, and it was so cold and snowing. We were trying to tell him where the tire ruts were to keep him, going straight on the road. We got into Montreal at like 5 a.m, and they gave away our hotel room, and we had to be up at 7 a.m. to get to the TV studio for the tapings, 4 hours of tapings, which Frenchie Martin ended up, breaking his foot because Don Ross threw him outside the ring, and the wrong side where the TV camera was. He landed on this big 4-inch cable, broke his ankle. Me and him in the room, they gave us a room, but it was one bed. So what we did was take the mattress off and the box, left the box spring.
Yeah.
Louis Martinez and Don Ross, slept on the floor on the mattress. Me and Frenchie Martin slept on the box spring. But at the side of the bed was one of those, quarter machines for the bed to massage,
Yeah.
So we put like a quarter in, nothing happened. We put another quarter in, nothing happened. It's darn it, we're out 50 cents. So just as about we're falling asleep, that darned box spring started shaking up and down. It knocked us out of the bed. Next thing you know, we land on top of Louis and Don Ross, and it's like, we just couldn't stop laughing. So we didn't get any sleep that night. Oh God. And then, twice, not only once, but twice, I got screwed on payoffs in Montreal.
Okay.
I still have the checks to this day. They were, Yvon Robert, I think, was one of the guys. I always remember his name on the bounce check.
Yes.
2 bounce checks I got from that promotion.
So the traveling, did you guys, other than the terrible winter trips, did you guys not mind traveling? Was it fun?
Oh God! Usually on any of the this is for superstars of wrestling now.
Yeah.
I would always ride with George Cannon. He had this big Cadillac, and he let me drive. That way he can relax and stuff.
Yeah.
And George was such a funny guy. Always telling jokes, always telling stories. So it was like he had me laughing the whole trip.
Okay.
It was just a joy to be with him. And then other trips, like with the UWA guys, usually I was traveling with Killer Brooks because I was managing him.
Yeah.
He was a riot to be with. I'm a young kid, and guys, like myself, I didn't partake in any kind of drugs or alcohol at any time back then. I was young. And it's like, here's these guys smoking pot and drinking whiskey and drinking wine on the trips. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, they must know what they're doing,
Yeah.
And, now when, I think back about it, it's like, oh my God, I'm glad I survived all that.
There must have been, I mean, I know what I did, and I wasn't quote a big shot, big time wrestler, right? So I can only imagine what some of these guys were and some of the habits they had. I'm not allowed to use stemware anymore. I have to drink out of those glasses as you're drinking out of now. I've broken too many glasses.
Oh no, I have stemware, but up here in my office, like I mentioned to you earlier, I just got done at our store at a wine tasting at our store, so I've got like 5 different bottles that I'm still sampling of, what we had at our tasting today.
Very nice. Dave, I was going to ask you tell us about your the TV series that you were doing that you've had on the Detroit page, the Detroit Facebook page. If anyone hasn't seen it.
Yeah, Big Time Memories. If anybody wants to, research and go and look, go to Rox TV, ROX TV, Big Time Memories on YouTube, and you can watch all the episodes. We have a ton of episodes. And it really started there was a documentary done about wrestling in Detroit that I was involved in. And it turned out to be the drizzling craps. They didn't do any justice on, the history of wrestling in Detroit.
Okay.
So I made it. Mark Bujan and myself did an article for Slam Wrestling where it appeared. And, we just ripped it apart. And, the producer and some other guy says, well, if you're so smart, if you could do it better, do it. So Rudy Hill, Rude Boy, a wrestler locally, had a promotion here. And he invited me, and Terry Sullivan was doing the lead announcing. And he had an idea. And he was involved in this documentary too. And he says, well, let's show them. Let's do it our way. And what we did is, we would do a show. Basically, we said 20 minutes to a half hour. But some of the episodes, went an hour, just because of the subject that we had. And what we did, we wanted to pay tribute to all the stars of big time wrestling. Sheik, Bobo, Furpo, everybody. And what we did basically a This Is Your Life. Mm-hmm. So me and Terry researched everything, their real name, the dates that they were born, where they were from, their youth, their wrestling career, and, how they passed away and, what they did, after their wrestling careers. And it just snowballed from, we didn't know what we were going to do, in the beginning. It snowballed into this massive, thing where we were getting tens of thousands of views on every show. And, right now we're up to worldwide in different mediums, over 7 million views.
Get out. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So in, response to our critics who, said, gave us grief about, giving grief about the documentary, well, we did it. We did it ourselves, and we did it a lot better than anybody else could ever do. It's just a hit, and we get so many, positive, comments and responses. We hope we did 3 seasons. We hope to do a 4th, but right now we're on hiatus.
Okay.
And, if people, the wrestling fans, want it, me and Terry are going to give it to them.
Awesome. That's great. I love watching it. It's so personal. You guys, both of you have something to say about the subject. It's not like me talking about something on what I've heard someone else say or what I've read. Not that I can't. I just, when I say something, I say, well, I probably read that, or I probably heard it from someone else. But, I wasn't in the dressing room with these guys. Holy smokes. You guys both were.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Me and Terry, we were there. Terry worked in the office, the Big Time Wrestling office. I was the photographer and writing the stories for the Body Press. We were both, traveling, to shows with these guys. We were sitting with them in the dressing room, and, sometimes, just on off days, myself, Killer Brooks, Jack Kane, and Don Kent, we would go golfing together. Okay. Or we'd be at the Sheik's house, just, doing whatever. Me and the one famous story on that is me and Killer Brooks were on these little mini bikes, and we were goofing around a little bit too much, speeding around, and at one point we went right through the Sheik's garden. Okay. And it's like we were going, oh no, and we didn't say nothing about it. We didn't tell anything, and we never got in trouble. Nobody found out that it was me and him.
Okay. What, Dave, on a tiny little bit of a serious note, why do you think that no one else showed up to the Sheik's funeral?
Oh, that's such a sticking point with me. I don't know.
You don't
just,
know?
No respect. He did so much for so many, but then again, he had so many detractors. And I'll say this, that there was times I'd be at CAC in Las Vegas, and it was just after she passed, and, guys were asking me about things, and, I was, talking with a number of guys, and one of the guys that was sitting there, Jack Briscoe, and Jack Briscoe, when he found out I was the only one at the Sheik's funeral, he goes, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. And it's like I said a couple explicatives to him, and that was it. I didn't need to say anything more. Same thing was said when I was at Titans in Toronto. Johnny Powers didn't have anything good to say about the Sheik also.
Yeah.
But what can I say? It was a cold winter day in January. I was still working at the time, and I, got up in the morning and I was going to go to work, and it's like, should I go to work or should I go to this funeral? And I really wanted to, pay tribute to my friend who did so much for me.
Yeah.
And it's like I ended up going and, saw him, and, we were at the funeral home to start with before the services. And it's like, I couldn't even recognize him. He was down to maybe 130 pounds.
Okay.
You couldn't tell anything about him. The only way I really knew it was him is that he still had the shape, the shaved beard, like in the shape of a saber that he had. Yeah. It's the only way I knew who it was. And then, I went to the grave site and, the services. Well, at the services at the church, the minister or the priest never said his real name. Okay. Always referred to him as the Sheik, which everybody did. And that's, and that was, great. I really loved that. Went to the grave site, and where he was interred. And I still to this day have 2 roses that were on his casket. Then we went to like a high school gymnasium where they had, food and stuff after. And, I talked to Eddie Farhat Jr. and Tom Farhat and Joyce Farhat for a while. They hadn't seen me in, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So we had a nice conversation, and, most of it was all family there. So I didn't stay too long. But I'm glad I did go. And then, one of the episodes on our big time memories, me and Terry went to the Sheik's mansion, which, now it's a bed and breakfast. So we did a whole show on, we went to the mansion, we went to the old wrestling office. That's a used clothing store now. We went to the old TV studio across the street, and we went to his grave. And just at his grave, it was very emotional for me, as it is now. Whenever I think of my good friends, especially Louis Martinez and the Sheik, great memories come back to me, and I get choked up.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get you choked up, but I know you watch our Facebook pages, and I try to not push as much as the Ontario guys or the Sheik that much, because I don't want to seem just set concentric to Ontario. But we know that the Sheik wasn't just Detroit. He wasn't just Toronto. But on the same note, so many people think that that's all he was. And so when I do find something interesting or different, I like to shout it out because it's important. This guy was the #1 heel of all time. And in a really roundabout way, he could be considered by some that he was the greatest wrestler of all time. Not technical, not this, but my God, he had like a 40 or 45 or 50-year career, and everything considered, not just the gimmicks, not just the bad stories, not just the everything about him. Come on, he was without a doubt the most important probably wrestler ever in my estimation. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm looking down. I'm trying to find my Sheik book written by Brian Solomon.
Yes.
And like you said, the Sheik traveled everywhere.
Yeah.
You talk about so many of the greatest wrestlers of all time. So many will say Bruno Sammartino. Well, Bruno was mainly East Coast, somewhere around here, Toronto. But he went to Japan very little, but he didn't do West Coast. He didn't do the Pacific Northwest.
Oh.
The Sheik went everywhere. I mean, he was so big down in Texas when he was young.
Yeah.
When he was first starting out, he was such good friends with Dory Funk Sr., and they used him a lot down there. And he was down there with his best friend, Leaping Larry Shane.
That's right.
And then when the Sheik bought the territory here in 1964, he was hoping that Larry Shane was going to be his top babyface. But unfortunately, we know that Larry passed very shortly after the Sheik bought the territory. But I agree that the Sheik, and I could be partial about this, but I think the Sheik is the greatest wrestler of all time. And like you said, he wasn't the greatest technical wrestler. A la, Ric Flair, guys like that.
Anyone.
Yeah. And, how do you rate, who is the greatest wrestler?
Yeah.
It's guys you saw in your own territory. Like everybody on the East Coast is going to say Bruno. Guys on the West Coast are going to say, Fred Blassie or John Tolos. Guys up in the Pacific Northwest are going to say Donnelly O'Jonathan. Texas, they're going to say Terry Dory Funk or maybe Fritz Von Erich.
Yeah.
So it depends on, that's unless you research wrestling history. And that's what I can respect about, some of the young kids who, watch, wrestling now. If they know about these other guys that, came before their favorite stars. And, one thing that'll tick me off to this day, and I got to put my hands behind my back when this happens, but you get some young snot, kid who, I'll mention, or somebody mentions the Sheik. Oh yeah, I saw the Iron Sheik. Oh Jesus, just let me smack you into oblivion. Iron Sheik. Oh, that dragon. Oh, he was an embarrassment to the wrestling community. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, he was not the Sheik, and I know that's one of our loves. Talking about him, we can talk about him for the rest of our days. Actually, I was not lucky enough to see him at any big shows other than the Great American Bash in Detroit, which was kind of crazy. But yes, bringing up that book, we had Brian on one of our episodes also, and he was phenomenal. He researched the yin yang out of that, and I mean, he talked to all the right people too. Which one of them was you, right?
I helped Brian along.
Yeah.
When he was, he interviewed me a number of times about, certain things. When he was writing, he would always send me a chapter or two that he had written, and I'd proofread it for him and make any corrections or misspellings or wrong guys, because some of the guys that he interviewed, would, say, it was this guy. Yeah. Well, really, it wasn't. It was this other guy, So he entrusted me in helping him
a little bit, yeah.
But to me, and I've read a lot of wrestling books, over time. I've always loved the Bobby Heenan books. I love the Dewey Robertson book, the J.J. Dillon book. But to me, the best researched, the best. What can I say? The Sheik book by Brian Solomon is the epitome of wrestling books. If you don't have that and you haven't read it, God bless you. You're not even a wrestling fan.
Shame on you. Yes. And
right.
One of the things that when we talked about Brian, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, and I just mentioned briefly, well, Brian, do you know about the book Drawing Heat? And he was like, and he just went crazy, right? Because to him, that was such a opening to another chapter in the Sheik's world, right?
Yeah, that was another great book, Drawing Heat. That thing went into so much detail, and at the time, that was still a breaking kayfabe book,
sure,
in a way.
Yeah.
Because back when that was written, a lot of the, wrestling business was still, secretive. It was in its own society, so the thing of kayfabe, they broke a lot of, rules in that book.
Let alone someone like opening up a page and seeing someone saying, and the Sheik said to me,
yeah.
It's like, well, you would see it on a different vein altogether. You could hear his voice when you were reading those words. I was shell shocked when I read that in 1988 or whenever the book came out, which was a long time ago. But so I want to thank you so much for your memories, Dave. It's great to see you and talk with you again. I wish I hadn't moved, because then we would have been able to see each other a lot more. It's been a great day for me thinking about having you on, and I really appreciate your time very, very much.
Wait, where are we going? we just getting started here.
No, we gotta stop. I have no other questions to ask you. If you have something else to say, go ahead. The floor is yours, sir. I wasn't cutting you off. I was just saying that while I remembered, because I forget, I'm not as polished as some people, that I really appreciate this. It's been very, very nice.
No, I really appreciate you having me on. Hopefully your audience, I have, taught them a little lesson in wrestling history, taught them something that they didn't know. Hopefully I've been entertaining for them. What can I say? I'm on Facebook, Dave Drason Burzynski, hit me up. And then we have a Facebook page, 50s, 60s, 70s, big time wrestling that, we're posting. I post lineups and results, and Terry Sullivan, puts his, 2 cents in all the time. And we have, we're telling the history of big time wrestling on Facebook. And, like I said, our, go to Rocks TV, Big Time Memories, and, look up your favorite, be it Bobo or Terry Funk. On our Facebook page, I'm, starting to, rebroadcast, all the episodes again.
Nice.
Originally they started 4 years ago, and a lot of new members haven't seen them before, didn't
That's
even
right.
know about the show. So I'm starting to put them from episode, season 1, episode 1, up to, the end of, season 3. Find an episode you like, and we even have Dressing Room Confidential, which tells just stories that don't relate to one particular guy. It's just stories that me and Terry had in the back of our head, and
Yes.
we relate them to fans, and we have fun with it.
So I was hoping that I'd be able to remember this. So recently, in the last couple of weeks, Terry has been putting on an absolutely fantastic daily kind of run through for the wrestling territories. It is absolutely marvelous. It's well researched. It's so good. I can't believe it. I was reading and I was like reading, and he starts off basically in Michigan and then starts traveling all over the world on a certain day. And it's very informative. And I really would like people to go check it out, because it's informative and it's interesting. And it's also telling the people that don't know, that maybe didn't know, that Johnny Valentine worked in Texas and in Buffalo and in New York and in Detroit and Chicago all at the same time, that kind of thing, right? It's really, really interesting.
Well, even back in the 50s, he was working, all around LA, San Bernardino and all those towns, where he was known as Cowboy Rocky Valentine.
That's right.
Yep.
Super cool. Super Dave. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to maybe have you back on again. That would be fantastic.
I can't wait for you and me to get together and share another glass of vino, my friend.
And unfortunately, I am ill prepared. I don't have any good wine at all right now. Although we've been able to find some half decent wine out here, but it's mostly French, and I'm very partial now to French. I don't buy anything else other than French, other than the Planck that I make downstairs. My Planck is Planck.
Yeah, and where you're at, look to Italy and Spain. They do some great stuff too.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure talking with you again, and I do really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Thanks, wrestling fan.
All right, guys. So that's a fantastic talk with my buddy Dave, Supermouth Dave, and I'm so happy to have been able to reconnect with him. He's a great guy, and he loves his wine, as do I. Don't forget, subscribe to our pages. National Wrestling Clipping Alliance main page, the Ontario Wrestling Clippings of the Past, the Wild Man main page, the Ric Flair tribute page, and the new BC page. And they're all growing exponentially. It's so fantastic. We're up over 4,000 members on our pages. Subscribe, share, love, and don't forget that we share professional wrestling history. We don't just share it. We just don't talk about it. No, we show it also. We're going to be showing tons of clips later on in the rolls. And as usual, ciao for now.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Wes.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Wes.
We are the National Wrestling Clipping Alliance. It's the NWCA Podcast.
I love doing this, and I love you in a, cool wrestling history kind of way.
Hey, easy, man.